we're talking about animal-assisted intervention with our vulnerable kids, specifically canine assisted. We've got the dogs. This is the model that Brenda and I are the most comfortable with. We'll be explaining part of the reasons for that as we're talking this afternoon. But this is not to say that there aren't other models out there that work just fine, but you'll hear a little bit about why we are really behind using certified facility dogs with our kids. That being said, Jordon, the little one on the floor, and myself, we're known as Team Jordon. I'm Denise Canas. I'm the Mental Health Program Director with the Kids House Children's Advocacy Center in Sanford, Florida. We work for Seminole County. Our CAC has got a child advocate program, a child protection program, a medical trauma team, as well as a mental health program. I've been involved, what did I tell you, 34 years. Mm-hmm. This summer I will have been involved in child protection in the Central Florida area. So not talking about the investigative side and all of that, and just talking about dogs is a lot of fun for me. This is like the reward at the end of my career, being able to play with dogs. But seriously, when I took over as the mental health program director, I really thought we needed to have a dog, some kind of animal-assisted intervention in our facility. And so I took 2 years doing research, trying to decide what would work best for us. And the reason I did that is because I was worried about our traumatized kids. We don't want to introduce anything into a facility that could possibly add to that trauma. And because of that, I really thought that getting a certified facility dog was the way to go. And so that's the model that we're going to be talking about here this afternoon. And I did do the clip.
Okay, and we are Team Tibet. Tibet's up here on the stage with me. We work in the 13th Judicial Circuit. We're actually starting to worm our way out into some other counties where we're being requested. I'm a little bit different from Denise in that, well, a lot different from Denise, and that's a good thing because for her, that's a good thing. But there's about 155 of these courthouse facility dogs working in the United States, and only 2 of them are handled by volunteers. The rest of them are handled by employees of the system. So they may be handled by an administrative, managerial, supervisory type person like Denise is. They may be handled by a forensic interviewer, a victim advocate, an attorney. We even have a judge handler in Washington State. We want to just kind of tell you a little bit about that. As Denise said, last year when we did our presentation, we honed in a lot on the neurobiology of trauma and how these dogs make a great fit for working with traumatized children. What we found out through our surveys and feedback is that when people come to these conferences, they get a lot of workshops on trauma, and maybe on the ACEs study, and for those of you that just came out of the toxic stress on the brain presentation, you're getting a lot of that. However, the people that come to our workshop really want to learn more about the dogs themselves. So we switched it up a little bit this year and made the presentation more about the dogs. As Denise said, we recognize that there are 2 basic models for using animals in court in the state of Florida. There's the therapy dog model and there is the facility dog model. And as Denise said, we both spent quite a bit of time independently researching which model we thought would be best for our circuits. I come into this work leaving the field of physical therapy, and I always had a very strong liability protection mindset. My husband, who works with attorneys and insurance companies all day long, has a very strong liability protection mindset. So we both have that very strong lens through which we look at how can we do this with the best liability protection possible. And we felt that after we researched both of these models, we felt the facility dog model was the way to go. We feel it's the safest for our child victims. We feel that it's safest for liability protections for us as handlers and for our programs. Our goal here today is to not diminish or disparage the work that therapy dogs are doing throughout the state. They're doing a lot of really great work. Our goal is to highlight the immense amount of work that goes into breeding, raising, and training, certifying, and ongoing training with these facility dogs, and why we think that that makes for a more desirable canine to be put into close proximity with vulnerable children. Secondly, what you're going to hear today is that there are a lot of organizations that can provide these types of dogs to circuits. We're going to talk a lot about what needs to be in place to get a dog and what kind of organizations you want to look for. Denise and I both received our dogs from Canine Companions for Independence, so that's the model we know. So that's what you're going to be hearing a lot about, but we don't want you to think that that's the only place that you can get a facility dog from. But they all have different, some of them purpose breed their dogs, some of them don't. Denise and I happen to feel that that's a very important component, is the purpose breeding. We always say that about 50% of what you see here in the way of demeanor is DNA, and the other 50% is a lot of training. And then they have different procurement procedures, different training techniques, all of those types of things. So it's important to kind of do your homework and figure out what you're looking for. Now, I just said that we're not doing a lot on trauma today, but we do have to do a little foundational work on trauma before we can go forward today. Trauma is any experience that leaves a person feeling hopeless, helpless, fearing for their life, survival, or safety. And this experience can be real or perceived. And we have to work with perceptions when we're working in trauma. If we're trying to create a trauma-informed system, we have to work with a child's perceptions. We have to understand that trauma is a sensory body experience that is retained in the body. That's why it's triggered by certain smells, triggered by certain sounds, triggered by the sight of a person who might look like their perpetrator. Okay, so it's a very deep in the brain type of thing that happens. So we have to go with perceptions. Traumatic memory is an overwhelmed system, and the results are fragmented and languageless. And so oftentimes we are asking children, very young children, to participate in very highly verbal processes, and it's very difficult because their trauma is encoded deeper in the brain. Because we want to help these children find their voice and heal, we have to try to find replacement sensory modalities that are more healthy and more adaptive. So what we're finding in trauma therapies is that your talk-based therapies are having a diminished effect in helping these kids. Our art therapies, our music therapies, our drama therapies, our animal-assisted therapies that are reaching the sensory parts of the brain are the treatments that are coming to the forefront in popularity in treating, now that we know the neurobiology of trauma. 2 keys to trauma-informed care, and I've seen a list as, keys to a trauma-informed care, I've seen a list as long as 10. But the ones we're going to focus on today are to restore a sense of safety and to introduce choice and control. Because we have cohabited with canines for centuries, if not thousands of years, it is more or less hardwired into our DNA that if we are in the presence of a calm dog, we can feel safe in our environment. If these dogs were nervous, if they were growling at the door, if they were barking, if they were stress panting even, and I've seen some of that in working dogs, even stress panting behaviors, we might start kind of picking up on that weird energy from the dog. So it's important, thanks Denise, it's important to have a dog that has an exceptionally calm demeanor when we're working in emotionally charged environments with children who have their own weird energy going on. The second key in providing trauma-informed care is to introduce choice and control. I think it was just mentioned in the presentation I just left on toxic brain and the developing brain, is that a lot of these kids really need to feel seen and heard. They need to feel like they're participating in their care. We always give the child a choice if they want to use the dog. Obviously, the dog is designed to help them feel more comfortable and safe in their environment. If a child has a bad history with dogs, or if they're afraid of dogs, certainly we are not going to use the dog in that particular environment. One of the things we recognize in trauma-informed care is the imbalance of power and control that exists in child abuse, particularly child sexual abuse. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to restore a little bit of that imbalance. And so when our dogs are on the stand with a kid, or when our dogs are in comforting a child before or after a forensic interview, or for those forensic interviewers that are dog handlers that are using their dogs directly in interviews, we're starting to restore a little bit of that imbalance of power and control. The coolest thing is to watch a kid who may weigh 20 or 30 pounds walk one of our dogs that may, weigh 40, 60 pounds. And when they take 3 steps forward, our dog takes 3 steps forward. And when they stop, the child stops, the dog stops. And so to have the dog mirror the child's motions is extremely empowering, and also to teach the child to give the dog commands. No better sight in the whole world than to see a child's face light up when they give Tibet a command and she responds to them, because they're not used to anyone doing what they say. They're always doing what everybody else says. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to empower a child before a forensic interview, before a deposition, before a trial testimony. They're just very, very powerful tools for that. So in trauma-informed systems, it's important to foster trust and create a sense of safety. And so I'm just going to read this slide. I know you guys know how to read, but just for audio learning. After 5 minutes of contact with an unfamiliar dog, 76% of children studied between the ages of 7 and 15 believe that they knew how the dog knew how they felt. Another 84% indicated that they would confide secrets to the dog. And this is an actual picture of Tibet. It was taken by the child's guardian ad litem volunteer. I was sitting right behind Tibet's back on the floor with the child, and he was starting to talk about some tough stuff. And she reached up and put her paw in there, and the guardian ad litem snapped the picture real quick, just like lift her phone snap and set it back down. So this is just a favorite picture of mine, as you can probably imagine that it is. So last year when we did the program on the neurobiology of trauma, we got really deep down into the neurobiology of trauma. And so you're going to see some things in these parenthetical comments. But dogs are a healthy and adaptive replacement sensory modality that can help children find their voice. I don't know if any of you have seen the still face experiment. It's a great piece of video. If you go to YouTube and just put in still face experiment, and what it will show you is that a kind face or a mean face, or a kind voice or a mean voice, radically impacts how safe we feel in our environment. Go into any courtroom, courthouse, you're going to see care managers who are in their computers, who are overwhelmed, who are in their telephones, and God bless them. It's hard work. But then you have this kind-faced dog come up and have attunement towards the child, and that creates a great safe environment feel for that child in that environment. It helps them to calm that persistent fear and survival state that we often see as a result of the neurobiology that's going on. Let me just kind of go through those real quick. Eye gaze, okay? There was a great piece of literature that shows that mutual eye gaze between people and dogs mutually stimulates the release of oxytocin in the bloodstream, which is the trust hormone. So that's a cool thing, all right? Unique smell of the dog, especially their feet, and just, it's a replacement sensory modality that's linked to something friendly and good and kind, okay? They're soft to touch, the ears especially, that's why we like this slide. That's Jordon, by the way. They are non-judgmental. They don't care if a kid's been sexually trafficked, okay? They're going to show love to that kid irregardless of the activities that child has been a part of, forced to be a part of, okay? The pressure and the warmth promotes the grounding, particularly important in Denise's work where kids oftentimes will dissociate, and she'll talk a little bit about that. We have things called mirror neurons deep in our brain, okay? So if I'm making a sandwich up here, the neurons in your brain that would make a sandwich are firing because your mirror neurons are watching me make a sandwich, okay? So the coolest example I can think of this is when I first started working with Tibet, I had a criminal judge. He wanted to see how Tibet would behave in his courtroom. And so he wanted her to be placed in a part of the courtroom where the attorneys were walking back and forth, and he wanted to see if that was going to distract her. And I knew it would be fine. I knew she'd, completely rock it, and she did. But what was interesting about that experience was that they brought in, on the other side of the courtroom, about 35, 40 feet away, they brought in a row of inmates that were all shackled, all in their orange jumpsuits, and they had to all sit down on the opposite side. And they all had very angry faces. The legs were just kind of, that nervous energy of the leg and that kind of thing. And then they caught sight of her laying on the floor. And over the next 5 to 10 minutes, I saw the angry faces start to soften. I saw the body language start to relax. So that was just kind of it's a really cool thing that these dogs do not have to come into physical contact with someone to affect their physiology. Very, very cool. Stuff that gets me really excited. Okay, let's talk about the types of dogs, because there's a ton of confusion about where dogs should be in the public. Emotional support animals are someone's pet, okay? They are labeled as an emotional support animal because that person has hopefully received documentation by a qualified mental health practitioner stating that they need the dog for support. The only places emotional support animals should be in the public are in housing developments that normally ban pets or on airplanes. They should not be in restaurants. They should not be in malls, nowhere else. And I consistently see dogs with an emotional support animal vest in places that they shouldn't be. Therapy dogs do not possess public access of any kind. So assuming if you have a therapy dog program in your circuit, your courthouse has made specific steps to approve that dog and maybe look at the training and the certification that they have.
Some clarification. When Brenda said that they shouldn't be there, that's because the laws that govern public access for dogs says that emotional support animals are only allowed in these two areas. It's not Brenda or I saying they shouldn't be someplace else. That's the only place the law covers them. Just
Right.
as a point of clarification.
Thanks for bringing that up. And then you have dogs, professional working dogs with public access per the Americans with Disabilities Act. Obviously, your guide dogs, service dogs, and it's interesting to know and interesting to point out that service dogs may or may not be professionally trained. The Americans with Disabilities Act only says that they need to be individually trained, okay? So in contrast to that, facility dogs, they're only trained by professional trainers, okay? So, but service dogs, anywhere, I think it's anywhere, they can be anywhere except a surgical suite or a restaurant kitchen, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's correct. And then we have seizure detection or blood sugar dogs, PTSD dogs, hearing dogs, which CCI also produces hearing dogs. Facility dogs have limited public access, so we are to be places where we're with a client, okay? And we get special permissions to come to these conferences and educate you all. And then law enforcement canines are kind of in a class all their own. I think I got everything on that. So this is kind of the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval. This is the logo for Assistance Dogs International. And they define a facility dog as a specially trained dog that is working with a volunteer or professional who is trained by a program. The work of a facility dog can include visitations or professional therapy in one or more locations. Public access is permitted only when the dog and the handler, who is a trained volunteer or professional, is directly working with a client with a disability. And our statement is that our traumatized kids have a disability. They're working at a disadvantage because of their trauma. We certainly know that academically most of them are behind, right? So that's a disability. So we say that our traumatized kids, and then what's the thing you were saying about the adoption or the...
And depending on the experience you had in child welfare, and we've kind of gone across the gamut with this over the last 3 decades, but technically, any child who is a dependent child is considered an at-risk special needs child. If you weren't aware of that, all of our kids that we're dealing with in the child welfare system are considered special needs. That's the reason that when we go to try to get our kids adopted, we always call those special needs adoptions. Now, some of the kids have got more challenges than others, but they're all considered special needs, which then actually puts them into this definition from ADI.
Okay, and then the next thing I wanted to point out is there's legislative language in a growing number of states, and I see this slide didn't get the Virginia bill on there. There's Virginia Senate Bill 420 that can be added to this list, and they specifically define a facility dog that is a graduate of a program that is accredited by Assistance Dogs International. Common settings for facility dogs. Facility dogs kind of got their start in rehabilitative settings, PT, OT types of environments, motivating clients in their therapy. Counseling and mental health, which is what little Miss J down here does. I call her Miss J. Educational settings with at-risk student populations, and then most recently in your legal courthouse advocacy types of settings. So we can assume from those settings that these dogs work with vulnerable populations. And because the dogs primarily work with vulnerable populations, we feel that it is very, very important that these dogs are the safest choice possible. And we're going to kind of start going through why we think these are the safest dogs that you can put into close proximity with a traumatized child. In just the 3 bullet points are facility dogs are safe because they are purpose-bred. So again, that demeanor goes right down to the DNA. They are safe because they are intentionally and strategically raised from birth. So when they start work, every day of their life was accounted for. There are no skeletons in the closet. I know there are some places that like the idea of using rescue dogs in their courts. And I just think it's an unsafe practice because we don't know what's going to trigger that dog. There's things we don't know about that dog's history. Facility dogs are safe because they've been professionally trained. So I could not take a puppy and turn it into this. I've been given enough education by Canine Companions for Independence as her handler to maintain the training that she's received by a professional dog trainer and to maybe teach her a couple of new skills if I want to. She has so many that I really don't feel that need. But with that, I guess I'm just going to turn it over to you now, Denise.
And I'm up, and I'm going to try to juggle 3 things. This is going to be really interesting.
This is why I stand up here.
I know. It does make it a little easier. So I'm sorry, I'm going to be in your face. I hope that's okay. Actually, let's go. This is actually you, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I can go through this.
So go ahead.
Well, Brenda actually kind of talked about this, the fact that facility dogs we think are the safest choice. And all of the things that are listed on this slide are things that I'm going to go into here in more detail. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue. Okay. As we mentioned, both Jordon and Tibet were purposely bred and trained by Canine Companions for Independence. So that is the model, the type of training, the program that we are the most familiar with. It also happens to be the program that has placed the most facility dogs in this type of setting in the country, and that we refer to them as courthouse facility dogs because of the vulnerable populations that they work with and the fact that they can't go into court with children. So, for purposes of a facility dog, they are purpose-bred, and that is important. There are all kinds of wonderful dogs out there. I happen to be a dog lover, and I've always had dogs, and I've had some very wonderful dogs. But there's something to be said about the DNA of a dog. CCI has got over 40 years of breeding into the background of these canines. They're basically bred for temperament and a lot of other things, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there's a big difference between breeds of dogs. If you have a livestock guardian dog that is guarding your goats from coyotes, you're going to want a dog that has got a certain kind of temperament. Not this. This is not a good guard dog. If you are going to want a dog that is a good watchdog, that's an alert dog, that's going to get your attention if someone walks onto your property, then you may want to look at a German Shepherd or a Belgian Malinois or another breed that is known for being more territorial, perhaps a little bit more aggressive. So that breeding, the breed that we're using, is important doing this kind of work. And as Brenda mentioned before, Dr. James Ha, who actually, I think he's still working out of Washington, isn't he? Or
no,
Oregon?
He lives in the Keys now. He retired.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's a change. He's done a lot of research on canines, and in part of his research, he does talk about the fact that 50% of a dog's personality really is due to that breeding, that genetic code that's ingrained. Okay, with CCI, they actually breed for the things listed there: temperament, trainability, health, physical attributes, litter mate trends, and the production history of the dam and sire. With all of the dogs that CCI breeds, only about 40% of them actually get to this point. So even with that tremendous breeding history, given how specific what they are looking for and what these dogs can do, it's very, very tough. Matter of fact, two of Jordan's litter mates are actually were pulled out to be breeders, and they were going to take Jordon, but Jordan's a little small, and he thought she might have trouble having puppies. Thank goodness, because otherwise I wouldn't have got her. Okay, so facility dogs are intentionally raised. There are two groups of people that are very important to this process. One are the breeder caretakers. All of these dogs are bred and birthed in Santa Rosa, California. They stay with the breeder caretaker for the first 8 weeks of life. And during that time, that breeder caretaker's responsibility is to start the socialization, but also start to build that attachment with people. That's very, very important to do right from the very beginning as they're learning skills, as they're learning to trust everybody around them, because that's what you want. You want that calm dog that thinks everybody loves them and everybody is their friend, because that's the reason that they can relate to people so well. Next, after the breeder caretakers, the puppy raisers are an integral part of this team. They're the ones that actually take the puppies and start that whole socialization and start to teach them all of their basic commands. They normally have the puppies until they're, it used to be 18 months. Now a lot of them are keeping them until they're 24 months old before they actually go into professional training. But their job is to socialize this puppy to a variety of areas. All of these dogs were raised to be potential service dogs. So they have to be exposed to a variety of things because you never know what kind of a situation that they're going to be in. And this is an example. This is Jordon as a puppy. You can see her sitting on a grate. Most dogs would be very uncomfortable with that. I know a lot of people that are uncomfortable standing on top of grates. But being used to walk on different surfaces, sit on different surfaces, toilet on different surfaces, because you don't always have a nice plush layer of grass someplace when your dog has got to go. So at any rate, different surfaces, different kinds of steps, being able to walk up and down steps. at the speed that whoever is walking with them is walking. So that if that person is slowly going down steps with a cane, they have to stay with that speed. If they were to pull, they could pull somebody down the steps. And as somebody that's not getting any younger, I really appreciate the fact that Jordon stays with me as I'm carrying all my stuff around up and down steps. The socialization part and what they're exposed to, the top picture, of course, those are all puppies. And those puppies are probably 7 to 8 months old in that picture. And look at all of the things around them. There's a plush toy, there's tennis balls, there's a kitten, and they have to be taught to ignore all that stuff. Okay? So that's part of that early socialization. The bottom, we call that the kibble challenge. Every puppy at CCI has to be able to lay still in a down while their name is spelled out in their dog food. That's what that is. That's her name, in her dog food, and ignore it. Now, that's really important because I'm going to talk a little bit about, in a few slides, I think it's in a few slides, the ADI standards, that Assistance Dog International, that good housekeeping seal of approval that Brenda mentioned. Okay, well, one of the parts of that test is you have to be out in public, literally drop food off a table in a restaurant, and the dog can't react to it. You have to be able to, well, actually, I could show you. You have to be able to, is Tibet going to be okay with this?
She better be.
Okay. Jordon, stay. Okay, it hit her in the nose. If you can, for those of you in the back that didn't see that. It's a good girl. Yes. I know. You caught yourself. Good job. But it's the idea that they have to be resistant to those types of things.
Now, just to tell you, my husband he's the only person that's allowed to give Tibet a treat in the morning because my other dog gets her glucosamine. And he does this real mean thing, like you drop the food on the ground and the thing is okay. That's when they're allowed to go get it. He'll say, Oklahoma, Okeechobee. You know, and there have been times...
I didn't know he did that.
Oh, yeah, he does that. And then there were times... One time he said, okie dokie, and she picked it up. He went, and she dropped it. And so,
yeah. Like when I said, and she's like, oh, yeah. But at any rate, all this talks about the socialization, what they're exposed to. It also talks about the massive control that these dogs have. I have kids that come in for therapy and they see Jordon and they say, I went to a therapist before that had a therapy dog. But that therapy dog would kind of run around the room when we had therapy and would step on the games. And if I pet him too long, they'd kind of snap at me, which made me, I was like, oh my goodness, no, can't have that. That isn't going to happen with these dogs. These dogs are going to go where you tell them to. They're going to do what you want them to do. They're bomb-proof, I think. And a lot of that, what I always like to say is that really, we're looking at genetics, learned behaviors, a environment that exposes them to all kinds of things, activities that occur that when they do the right thing, that's rewarded. When they do the wrong thing, it's corrected. When you put all of those things together over 2 years, you get a dog that has behaviors that we know what's going to happen in any given situation. Those breeder caretakers and those puppy raisers that I mentioned, they literally, part of their job is to document every single experience that these dogs have. So we know if something has happened that has triggered them along the way, that may actually get them excluded from the program, depending on how bad it is. But that's part of what goes behind having one of these dogs. Okay, so I mentioned the fact that the puppy raisers keep them. At this point, they were talking about 18 months, but lately I've been talking to puppy raisers that says that they are actually keeping the dogs for a little bit longer than that. And at that point, for a facility dog, they go to an agency that's a member of Assistance Dog International for professional training. What that means is they spend the next 6 to 9 months every day working with a professional trainer. With CCI, the professional trainer that they're working with, by the time that they become a full-fledged trainer, has 4 years of apprenticeship before they're allowed to be let loose with a string of dogs as a professional trainer. And then the facility dog graduates after they make sure that they can pass all of those requirements in the Assistance Dog International Public Access Test, as well as being healthy and safe in a public setting. Okay, this is another thing that's near and dear to Brenda's and my heart, and that is, we're working with kids. We're working with kids who have been traumatized. So one of the very, very important things that we needed to have as a dog that we knew was going to be safe around kids. And here, we talk about public access tests for facility dogs requiring a child to approach a dog, pet it, and the dog to remain in a down position. You can't have a child coming up and reaching for one of these dogs and the dog get all excited and all of a sudden jump up and knock the child down. It has to be very, very controlled. So that safety issue is important, and that's where the genetics and the constant training actually help. We'll mention this about facility dogs. That good housekeeping seal makes sure that the agencies that are involved with these dogs are using the highest standards for their health, their welfare, the task work that they do, all completely around their training. Therapy dogs aren't certified the same way. Therapy Dogs International actually will register therapy dogs, but they don't allow access to children as part of the test that they do. They don't allow that because they don't want to. They don't require a dog that's presented, even if the dog is going to be working with children, to demonstrate the ability to be calm around kids. Nor do they necessarily require any kind of obedience or training class. So with these guys, not only do they have to be tested, but they have to be recertified on an annual basis, depending on how long they've been a dog. Sometimes if they've been tested, recertified several times, they'll give you a little bit more time between those recertifications. But their skills have to remain sharp. They have to remain safe in the public. Okay, these are professional dogs for a professional environment. At the CAC, Jordon, it goes and gets involved with all of our programs. She also goes to MDT staffings with me, death reviews with me, because she helps with vicarious trauma, and we'll get to that. But it's very important to have a dog that is going to be a professional, that's not going to be just running loose around our CAC or in a courtroom. And that, again, going back to what Brenda said, safety for our clients, safety for us as handlers, and safety for the agencies that we work with.
And that was an important selling point when I was trying to get this program up and going, is to help them understand that we were not going to turn the courtroom into a circus.
That is kind of important.
Yeah.
Judges appreciate that. Okay, the other part about facility dogs is the handler selection and training. And that really is the other half of the equation. Brenda had mentioned that ADI talks about them being handled by a trained volunteer or professional. All of the organizations that do this carefully vet who gets these dogs. In the Southeast region, when I got Jordon, which was, 20 months ago? Over 6,000 applications were received for a service dog, an assistance dog, which included facility dogs, but also service dogs, skilled companion dogs, hearing dogs. They placed 100 out of 6,000. That's how competitive this is, because they want to make sure that the person that is getting this dog will be able to handle the dog, that the dog will be safe, that you're going to represent them well, and if they're going to put $50,000 to $60,000 into one of these dogs and give it to you for free, they want to make sure that that dog is going to be very well cared for and be used for the intent that they had for it. Okay, so with CCI, just real quick, I should back up. With the therapy dogs, there's no minimum age to be a handler. You don't even have to be an adult to be a handler for a therapy dog. Now, to test with your therapy dog, you have to have an adult present, but then you can provide therapy dog services without being an adult. Have some concerns about that. They also say that the handler should be of good moral character, and I'm not really sure how they determine that, but okay. With canine companions, and this, I use this just as an illustration when I was training our staff when I got Jordon. You start out applying for an application. If you make it through that, and the application is, I think it was 8 pages long, and then our ED actually had to do one that was 6 pages long. I had to take pictures of my office, our entire facility, my home. I had to tell them all about everybody that lived in my home, all of my animals. They had to contact my vet. I had to write an autobiography. That was my application. Then, if you get through that process, this is how they get from that 6,000 down to 100 very quickly. Then you have a phone interview. It's normally an hour. They ask you all kinds of questions. They go through your application with you. If you get through that, then you have a day-long interview at the Southeast, for us, it was the Southeast Regional Headquarters, where they talk to you more about the dogs. They interview you. They watch how you interact with dogs. They kind of look at your handling style. You make it through all that. Then you go on the waiting list to see if they can find a dog that will match you for your facility. For lots of people, that wait is 18 to 24 months. Miss Jordon and I got through that entire process from me applying for that application to graduating with her from team training in 4 months. So that was
Rocket fast.
yes, rocket fast. But part of that team training too, once they accept you into team training, you have 2 weeks that you spend all day long with the dog. You get written tests every day. They watch you and give you different things to do with your dog, so they watch your handling every day. So you've got multiple trainers watching you, correcting what you're doing, making sure that you're learning what you're supposed to be doing with these dogs. And then at the end, there's a written test and then a public access test, which here locally, we go to the Altamont Mall and they do the test. They do the test there, actually there in the mall. Okay, so that's how you get a dog through CCI. Okay, and we call these courthouse facility dogs because, and I think I mentioned, that they're working with vulnerable populations. They can spend time in court. This is kind of the placement of where a lot of these dogs are, and this is according to the Courthouse Dogs Foundation. Most of them, as you can imagine, are with victim advocates, attorneys, forensic interviewers, law enforcement, therapists, CASA, GAL type folks. And then there's some outliers, but that's kind of where these dogs, most of the handlers for these dogs are. Okay. Veterans Affairs. We have lots of vets that have PTSD these days. And one of the things that they have said is that for a vet to get reimbursed for any costs related to the use of a dog, the dog has to be certified by ADI or the International Guide Dog Federation, because those are the highest standards out there in the industry. They kind of equate it to the fact that if you're looking for health care and the government is going to subsidize payment of your health care, we want to make sure that they're only subsidizing the highest quality out there. And that's the same to be said for our facility dogs.
And we think that same standard should be held to our victims.
Yeah, kids deserve that too. You're right. Okay, certified facility dogs can work an 8-hour day, 40 hours a week. Jordon goes to work with me every day. If I am at work, Jordon is at work. That doesn't mean she's working every minute of that, because I'm also supposed to be taking care of a mental health program. So, we kind of trade off and pick what we're doing, but they can work a 40-hour week. Pet Partners, which is one of the groups that actually has standards for the use of therapy dogs, says that a therapy dog should work no more than 2 hours a day. And that's because what they do is stressful. It's very stressful. Jordon picks up on all of the stress, all of the emotions of everybody around her. Part of my job is to make sure that she doesn't get overwhelmed in that kind of a setting. And that's with the purpose-bred breeding and the training and all of the socialization that she has had. So that's pretty significant. So our therapy dogs that are out there that are working with agencies that are working there 20, 30 hours a week actually are going far beyond what is recommended for what they should be capable of. Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about the video?
Sure. I'm going to set this up. The video we're going to show you is great for Gal Disabilities Conference because this is about a person with a disability who really, really benefited from a courthouse facility dog. This is the video that I said, I am leaving my profession and I am going to close down the doors of my practice and I am going to now be in full-time child advocacy with a dog and bring a dog to Florida because we didn't have a courthouse facility dog program yet in Florida.
I had given up on all humans and in trusting them because the humans have done a lot of wrong to me, and it's easier to have faith and trust in the dogs because the dogs always give you 100% faith and everything, and they're always there, and humans, well, they leave you. Hello, my name is Douglas Lair. Just recently I had a court trial with Ellie and Paige, who was the district attorney for the King County Courthouse. And I just want to tell you something. Paige had a new idea to come up with a dog to help me. She's a handicapped dog to help me. Her name is Ellie. And Ellie really helped me get through the trial. For the trial was long and hard, and it was very complicated. They had the district attorney, and they had a lot of other attorneys there. And even preparing for the trial was very scary. And every time that I came to see Paige, Ellie was always there to be with me. It was the one time when I was with all the attorneys and their detectives when they were questioning me in a big round table. They were all sitting around a big round table, and they were all looking at me, and Ellie was underneath the table, and Paige was sitting very close to me, and I was holding on to Paige and Ellie while the questions were being asked. And I was very scared, very nervous. I even wet my trousers a little bit. She didn't even know that. When I first found out that I had to go to the trial, I was very scared, and I did not know what to expect. I'd never been in the courtroom. I'd never been in a jury box. I did not know very much about being with a judge and a jury, and Paige, the district attorney. I never met a district attorney before, and it was very strange. Usually district attorneys are women and men, and let me tell you something, they are very good, and Paige is one of the best district attorneys in the world, and so is Ellie. And we were not allowed to mention certain things during the trial, like the previous jail things or anything, and the dog helped me remember not to mention it and not to get the trial thrown out. The defense attorney reminded me of Cruella de Vil, and Ellie was there to protect me and to make sure that I was safe. She was like the super god that protected me. Defense attorney brought this big manuscript, and she would refer to pages, and Ellie knew I was getting lost and everything, and Ellie just laid there, and Ellie said, next page. Ellie just kept telling me what page to read and what paragraph to go on, and then the district attorney and then the judge would get in there, and then the defense attorney would approach very closely, and she was very scary too. She was very scary when she approached me. Ellie came with me to the sentencing, and the sentencing was still very scary because he was without any handcuffs or anything. He was still walking free and being around, and he could walk by people, and he was very scary too, and so was the defense attorney. But Paige was there, and Ellie was there, and they both protected me. I owe Ellie one big hamburger because she really helped me through the trial, and she helped me not be scared and help get a conviction during the trial. And this was a very hard trial to go through because it was very complicated for the district attorney. and she was able to win the case.
With Doug, the whole thing about this, he obviously is a disabled adult. He was very scared of our system. Our system is scary. Any of you guys had to testify in court? Criminal court especially? Okay. You don't know who the people are. You don't know what questions are going to be asked. You know everybody, it's you against that person. You have to face your perpetrator in the courtroom. That's tough. And because of Ellie, the dog that was there, he managed to get through that process and did great. But it's really a testament to what these dogs can do. Now I'm going to tell you about a couple of other stories about what these dogs could do. This artwork was done by a little boy I'm going to call Jason. He was 6 years old when he started at therapy at Kids House. Now, the two cases I'm going to talk about are therapy clients. Jordon does, though, get involved with kids that come in for forensic interviews. She goes back to medical exams with kids if they want it. She helps kids who are waiting, helps keep them calm in our lobby. We do very structured things with her in a therapeutic way. She isn't just a dog that provides comfort. We actually have specific activities that she does with the kids to build self-esteem, to give them a voice, to encourage them to do certain things. The picture that's on your left, I'm going to get back to Jason. When he came to therapy at Kids House, he allegedly had been sexually abused by another child and had been at school and had been exposed to severe domestic violence. The therapist had been seeing him for a while before we actually got Jordon, and she was having a hard time actually having him focus during therapy. So that they, were months into therapy, and she's still trying to get him to calm down and build a rapport and learn some basic coping skills, not really even doing any trauma processing. He was also having problems at home. Mom was frustrated because he was having all these behaviors. Although we could help her understand why he was having these behaviors, we weren't able to get anywhere with it. And his therapist, Ashleah, in therapy, he'd be all over the room, just going from one thing to another. So trying to keep him settled and focused was difficult for her. So we introduced him to Jordon. And of course, he immediately took to Jordon. And Jordon started becoming something that they talked about in therapy because he was always bringing up what was going on with her. And the therapist noticed that he started to calm down as they were talking about Jordon. And then it became where, well, you know what? We'll go out and see Jordon after we finish doing A, B, and C. And A, B, and C got done like that at that point because there was a reward at the end. So Jordon was actually a reward. She'd meet with him at the beginning to kind of get him calm before he started therapy, but then also at a reward at the end. And I have a toddler gate across the door to my office, not to keep Jordon in, but to keep everybody else out. So Jordan's got someplace where she's got some peace. And he stopped me one day, and he said, Miss Denise, why do you have that gate across your office door? And I explained to him that my office was Jordon's safe place, that that's where she could go, she could sleep, she could rest, she could play if she wanted to. She didn't have to do anything that she didn't want to do. She didn't have to get bothered by anybody. Nobody was going to hurt her there. So the therapist, of course, picked up on that. He went into our group room and drew the picture that's on the left. And that's supposed to be Jordon behind my toddler gate with all the hearts and everything around it. And Ashleah asked him where his safe place was. And he thought about it for a minute. And his initial response was, I don't have a safe place. And then he was quiet again, and he thought about it, and he said, no, Jordon's my safe place. I feel safe when I'm with Jordon. And so that was something that we could build on. And he decided that when he was around Jordon, he felt safe and calm and happy. So those were feelings that the therapist could equate with Jordon, that we could start to build on something positive in his life. The picture on the right, we do lots of sand tray work with our kids in therapy. The picture on the right is a sand tray. And that in the back, that cave-like structure, the figure representing Jason is actually back in that cave where he's safe in there. And after we got Jordon, we'd been doing sand tray work, but after we got Jordon, all the kids said there needed to be a figure that represented Jordon for sand trays. So I got in touch with all of my fellow CCI grads, and I said, I need you to be on the lookout for a dog that looks like Jordon. So we found 4 of them so we could have them on all of our sand trays, but that's supposed to be Jordon outside the cave. So Jordon is keeping him safe while he's back in the cave. But then he was worried about Jordon. So he got the fence out. So he had to keep Jordon safe. Okay. Every other person in this child's life is buried in the sand outside that fence. Where he's safe is hidden away with Jordon. We continued to build on all those positive feelings about Jordon. And we developed something that we called a Jordon jar, specifically for Jason. And he assigned a color to each of those feelings, that safe, calm, and happy. And we cut up pieces of paper like confetti in those 3 colors, and we put them in a plastic jar. Plastic jar had Jordan's picture, a photograph that I cut out, and put it on the inside, so glued it on the inside so he could see it, just a plastic jar. And he decided that those were all the feelings that he had when he was with Jordon. So when he got home, and if he was angry or upset or frustrated or scared, he would pretend to drink from his Jordon jar. And all of those feelings would go down his throat and into his heart, so he could feel exactly like he did when Jordon was there. This is Jason. He spent lots of time with her. He just fell in love with her. Shortly after he did that cave, he actually came forward and disclosed that his brother was also sexually abusing him in his home. So when he said there was no place he was safe, he was right. The therapist really thinks that the time that he spent with Jordon is what enabled him to find his voice and do that. And I'm gonna cry. Sorry. Okay. Another story. This boy is Eric, and or we'll call him Eric for the day. Eric was 12. Eric was adopted out of an orphanage in the Ukraine, he and his sister. When he first started coming to Kid's house, he was scared to death to come and talk to the therapist. I mean, he liked Kid's house, he was comfortable there, but that anxiety about, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to talk about something that happened to me was tremendous. And his mom mentioned it, the therapist was working with him on it. So what we decided to do, he really needed some time that was just for him. He was severely attachment injured, had been through all kinds of abuse and neglect before he was adopted, and we were having problems developing a bond with the adoptive family. He was just very withdrawn from them. But Jordon was his buddy, and so we started in order for him to be calm before he started therapy, Jordon and I would spend an hour prior to his therapy session just hanging out with him, whatever he wanted to do. Oftentimes that was watching a video, just some movie where he could sit there and cuddle with Jordon. But we did, a variety of things. He started to feel better about coming. It was obvious because he was actually starting to open up to the therapist. One day, he had gone back into the therapy session, and the therapist came and got me, and she goes, I really need you and Jordon. I'm like, okay, what's up? And she says, I need you back in my office. And I grabbed Jordon, we went back there, and Eric was sitting in the office with tears streaming down his face. Come to find out later that his mom had given the therapist some pictures that were taken back at the orphanage to show him, and that just triggered him, and he couldn't get himself back under control. So I asked him what he wanted to do, and he got down on the floor. He was sitting in a chair initially. Jordon went up and licked his tears, and she laid down at his feet. He got down on the floor with her. He wanted a blanket, so we covered the two of them up with a blanket. 10 minutes later, he's calm, completely regulated again. Everything is okay, and he's ready to go back to therapy. I take Jordon back to my office. That picture that's on the stool in the middle bottom, I gave him the picture because I thought, okay, if this is going to be comforting to him, let's give him this picture and see if that will help. He can take that with him when he left that day. So he left. The following week when he came in for therapy, he came back to me and said, Miss Denise, thank you so much for that picture. I took it with me everywhere. I even put it in my agenda and took it to school, and when I started feeling nervous at school, I got it out, and Jordon helped me. So I thought that was pretty cool. He's been coming to Kids House for a while now, and you can see pictures of him and hear more about their story and what goes on Jordon's Facebook page. But 2 months ago, I guess it was, maybe a little bit longer than that, because it was before we presented in February. Eric came up to me when I went out to get him for his Jordon time, and he gave me this picture. Okay, this is the little boy that was scared to come and got so anxious about coming to Kids House. Now he's drawn a picture of Kids House. The horizon's the sun. There's actually an exit to Kids House. He's all excited about coming to Kids House now. Matter of fact, 3 weeks ago, he showed up. Yeah, it was about 3 weeks ago. He showed up, and he was sick. He had a really bad cold. He was coughing and everything, and I was like, Eric, are you sure you should be here and you shouldn't be home? Miss Denise, it's my time to spend time with Jordon. It's been 8 days since I have seen her, and I wasn't missing another day. So it's like, okay, cold and all, here, here's Jordon. So the difference that they can make, I just can't even describe the differences that we have got as far as helping kids find a voice. Little ones where you teach the commands, and we had a 4-year-old girl that when she first started coming into Kids House, she hid behind Mom. When she talked like this, and you couldn't hear her. And by the time we finished, she spent time with Jordon, and we did structured fetch with her, where we could have her give Jordon commands. And we started out slowly, where she would just give some of the commands, and we actually had specific steps as we played fetch. And by the time she graduated, she was coming up to my office, and her hands on her hips, and like, Miss Denise, this is what I want to do with Jordon today. Okay, sweetie, you got it. So the difference that they can make in the healing and the finding a voice is absolutely amazing. And there are dozens of those stories that we could tell. But there are other benefits to having facility dogs around, and that is, in this kind of work, there's a lot of secondary trauma, that vicarious stress that we all carry around with us. And they can make a huge difference with that. For us, it's not unusual for people to come to my office and say, Denise, I just got finished with a really bad interview. Can I have some Jordon time? And they just sit and play with Jordon for a little while, and that helps them calm down again. Even our community providers have called and said, Denise, we've had a really stressful week, and we could really use Jordon out here. Could we have her for a little bit? And we see what we can do to make that happen, because it really does help. One example, this is Jordon giving kisses to Detective Bowen. He's one of our local law enforcement detectives. We were actually called out. One of our local law enforcement agencies had this horrible, horrible case. Multiple shootings, multiple scenes all over the county. Several people died. Law enforcement officers were injured. They were having a debriefing to talk about everything that had happened. And they brought in their crimes. I mean, everybody was there. The room was filled with about 45 people. And the captain had called me and said, Denise, do you think we could borrow Jordon for this? I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but let's see what we could do. So I took Jordon over there for their debriefing. And literally, Jordon just kind of wandered around the room and spent time with everybody. And you could see these tense guys just immediately relax. The shoulders would go down, their breathing would slow down, they'd start to smile, even though they were talking about horrible things that had them all stressed out, because it was one of those situations where no matter what they did, the media was saying that they did something wrong. So they were all very stressed. But this is the difference that they can even make with some of our community partners. And
okay, so community engagement, you're only limited by your creativity. We do a lot of collaborative work with our Child Advocacy Center. So the picture on the upper left is an outreach. She okay? Okay. An outreach that we did with our Child Advocacy Center. Upper right is Tibet's a great little guardian ad litem volunteer recruiter. I always say that, and I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing, but There's nothing inherently riveting about our display tables with pictures of sad children in courtroom scenarios. People aren't generally drawn to that, but they are drawn to the dog. So I know I must have a recruiter in the room. There he goes. He's down on the floor. But she really helps draw people in, especially when you've got a lot of tables and a lot of nonprofits and things like that that are looking to recruit their volunteers. And then the lower center is a very special project that was done for us in the last calendar year. Tibet had a documentary that was produced on her in 2016, and it played at several film festivals around the state. And this group of Yale alumni saw the film and decided that they wanted to do something very specific to support Tibet's work. They have a Yale Day of Service every year. So they partnered with Rooms to Go outlet on I-4, the big one that's right outside of Tampa. And those folks basically opened their doors to us and said, I was tasked with coming up with the idea of what are we going to do for this Yale Day of Service. I said, what I would love it if in the downtown area, we had a slice of Mary Lee's house, which is our child advocacy center. I would love it if we had a slice of that in the downtown area so that when people need to interview children, we have a trauma-informed environment. We don't have a very lawyerly office with credenzas and law books and that type of thing, but we have something very friendly. So the Rooms to Go on I-4 basically opened their doors and said, y'all go shopping and carry it out. And so we were able to redecorate a room at the guardian ad litem office. And so now we open our doors to all of the folks in downtown Tampa, public defender's office, OAG's office, state attorney's office, anyone that needs to interview a child in the downtown area and wants to do that in a trauma-informed environment can request our room. So that's kind of cool. Collaboration with other agencies. We've done work with Homeland Security and other counties. And this is a picture of Tibet with the Safe House director, and she participated in 2 depositions of this victim, and then we did the trial support. So we still have contact with her. I've only got a few more minutes before we're finished. So the next thing we're going to do is what I call the parade of dogs, and this is the fun part for me. This is a group of dogs that are working throughout the country with different types of handlers. And so when you access your app, or you can access our PowerPoint, I'm not going to read every word on these slides, but this is Nomad, and he works in Bristol, Virginia, with play therapist Donna Callis. This is Ace, and if you are anybody in the play therapy world, you know the name Dr. David Crenshaw. He's a powerhouse in that field. And he works with Ace, who is trained by ECAD, and they're up in the northeastern United States. This is a cool dog. This is a Canadian dog, and the reason for this dog was trained by PADS, Pacific Assistance Dog Society. So this kind of feeds into that idea. You can get these dogs different places. The only reason this dog works is for the vicarious trauma of first responders. This dog is not for victims. Our first responders are often victims, unfortunately. I think the suicide rate for first responders is getting to be a really big deal and a really big concern. And when I'm over at our Child Protective Investigative Division, bringing Tibet over for stress management visits, I'm constantly, you guys need to get your own dog. Seriously, you need to get your own dog. Not because I don't want to come and visit them, but they really need their own dog. I love this team. I love Leroy. Rhonda and Leroy weigh about the same. He's enormous, and she's a tiny little thing. And they do a lot of school-based intervention. She's a forensic interviewer. And then they do a lot of school-based intervention in groups with children in schools. This is an actual prosecutor in Anderson, South Carolina, who is a dog handler, Chelsea Moore and Roma. This is a Canadian victim assistance dog, Caber. Now, I know Caber's your favorite. Caber's your favorite, yeah. Caber was involved, there was about 9 facility dog teams that were deployed to the Las Vegas shootings. Caber was one of those dogs. This is a great one. I love this one. Tommy Beeson is a good buddy of mine. He was a vice cop who had a bite dog. And he talks a lot about mission-specific breeding and the different breeds of dogs. And obviously, these dogs are never going to jump over a car and take down a suspect. But likewise, you wouldn't want a lot of those dogs comforting vulnerable witnesses. So it's a lot about the DNA of the specific breed of the dog, and that's important. A lot of times when I'm looking at therapy dog programs across the state, I see a variety of breeds being used. And I just think we have to be very, very careful about safety. So basically, in summary, these dogs are just an amazing addition to a community. They're an amazing addition to a multidisciplinary team. Their impact extends beyond what happens in the courtroom, beyond what happens at the CAC. As Denise said, the little picture of the guy, he took it to school. Kids that leave a deposition, they go home and they talk about that dog. They don't talk about the deposition. And I hear these stories. I don't follow these people home and listen to what they're saying, but I'm hearing stories that all he talked about was the dog, the dog, the dog. He didn't talk about the deposition. So their impact extends beyond the door. So the addition of a facility dog to your team communicates that you care about victims and you care about your communities. And with that, we will open it up to questions. Yes, ma'am. Do I? Yeah. Oh, sorry, this is their Facebook pages.
Yeah, just so you guys know, you
Yeah.
can learn more about the work that they do, what's going on at Jordon's Journal or at Tibet, Tampa Bay. They both have got Facebook pages. Jordon is actually stories from her perspective. So you can check that out if you want more information. But now, do you have questions? Okay, I think I'm supposed to give this to you. Okay.
Other than Labradors, and I know Golden Retrievers make generally good facility dogs, what other type of breeds do you think would make a good facility dog?
CCI, I guess I should follow my own advice here. CCI only breeds Labs, Golden Retrievers, and Lab Golden Retriever crosses. And that is purposely because of the trainability and the temperament, all of those things that we talked about. Now, I have heard, though, somebody was talking about some Labradoodles that were really good. You just want to be very, very careful that the dog is calm and trainable and can maintain this kind of control. If these dogs were up and running around right now, same with the kids. The kids will say, they're so calm. And the next thing you know, they're petting them and the kids are calm. You want that. You don't want a Jack Russell Terrier, jumping up and down, because then that gets everybody kind of more excited. Other questions?
If you don't have a local resource to get the dog, say if you were in Tallahassee or on the Panhandle, and there was a dog available in Orlando or Tampa, could that dog come up to your courthouse the day of and be ready? Or does a dog need to go familiarize itself with the courtroom and then be able to?
Our dogs are fantastic. They can do anything. Actually, Brenda and Tibet they're based out of Pinellas, Hillsborough County, and they're going over to Brevard County for, hopefully, it looks like we are, in July for a trial. They don't have to go there earlier. And it just depends on, there are 3 courthouse facility dogs that have this training in the state of Florida: Tonks, Tibet, and Jordon. If there is something that we can do to help in another area of the state, we will certainly try to do that. There is some preliminary work that has to be done with your courts to make sure that the court's going to allow the dog in, motions and some of that kind of stuff. But we can certainly try to help.
Well, I was just going to say, ideally, yes, that having the preliminary, getting the dog together with the child and having a relationship. And I'm a planner. That's my personality. What I found in working in dependency court is the whole system flies by the seat of its pants. And oftentimes I will get... Yeah, me too. Yeah. This is why we work well. For a good balance. But oftentimes I will get calls like the night before trial, and they want Tibet to help, the next morning or whatever. And I keep trying to re-educate, but we have successfully pulled it off. Typically, if the kids like the dogs, the bond is almost instantaneous, and we just go and we do. It's not how I like it. What you're describing is better.
But you
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Just a couple of things. First, something that came to mind as I was seeing all these pictures of the dog. I remember reading Animals in Translation a few years ago, and Temple Grandin was talking about that labs are such great dogs because they're by nature, they have a high tolerance level for pain, so kids can just abruptly come up and like jump on them, and also that they're fear fleers rather than fear aggressors, and that really stuck with me, and I've thought a lot differently about dogs since then. But my question, I guess, is more geared to you, because I know there's having a dog come into a criminal courtroom immediately acknowledges that the victim is a victim. And that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons we use the term facility dogs, because if you use the term therapy dog, you're implying that that child needs therapy. If you're using the term comfort dog, you're implying that that child needs comfort. So this is just a very legally neutral term. Courthouse Dogs Foundation has a wonderful, wonderful best practices manual on the use of these dogs in legal proceedings. And it talks about everything that you should do, all the steps that you should take to protect the right of that defendant to a fair trial while providing a fair accommodation to a vulnerable witness. So that is out there, and it's if you go to www.courthousedogs, oh, here it is. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4? Yeah, that bullet point. If you go to that, you will download that entire best practices manual, even right down to jury instructions. So typically what they like to have happen is for the jury to not know the dog is there, but if the dog does something to make their presence known, i.e. having a dream,
moving around during the dream, because
and it
that does
happens.
happen sometimes if they fall asleep.
Then the judge can have a ready-made jury instruction that's been strategically written to minimize appellate challenge.
There's actually a lot of good information in that manual. When I went to write our initial procedures before I got Jordon, I actually used a lot of that manual to kind of gear what I thought we could and couldn't do with the dog and what best practices were in relation to handling the dog in a facility type setting. Other questions? If you would like, Brenda's card, my card's up here, Tibet's trading cards, as well as information regarding Jordon's Facebook page. That's all up here. You can take it if you would like. And of course, if you think of other questions later, anything that we can do to help, if you're interested in getting one of these dogs and you just kind of want to talk what that looks like, feel free to contact us.
Thank you very much.